Do you ever have those moments where you read a stat and you just can't even believe it yourself? I recently had that when reading about Canada's Gen Z. And get this, 1 in 5 Canadians in their 20s expect to have 2 kids in their lifetime. That means the nuclear family in Canada has fully broken down. But as I read through the data, it's not that many Gen Z don't want to have kids. It's that Canada and our country has actually made it impossible for many to even aspire to the idea of having 2 kids. Let's break this down. Now, I'm not here to moralize and tell you all to have kids or anything like that. I'm actually here trying to understand why the largest youth generation in Canada's history feels so disconnected with their future. Now, I want to throw some more stats at you. 34% of those aged 20 to 29 say they may never have kids, and 40% of youth between 18 to 25 say they want 0 kids. As well, the fertility rate, which I've mentioned on previous videos, is very low at 1.3. We're almost the lowest across the G7. We're the second lowest, I believe. And here's the interesting piece to all of this. Youth today in the Gen Z category place far less importance on marriage, financial stability, and having kids and career aspirations than any young generation in the history of Canada. And that, to me, is far more alarming. You know, the things that are stalwarts of leading a successful life in terms of financial stability, seeing a future that you can also participate in, if marriage and kids happen, that's great. Career aspirations. These are some of the things that I believe help anchor us in our lives to some degree. And of course, this is very interesting to see that Gen Z do not value these things in the same light. Here's something interesting that I found in a social values report of Gen Z and what they value right here in Canada. 1 in 3 believe that they're not making enough to live the life that they want to live, yet 70 to 80% of Gen Z are working. That means that they're working, but they're perhaps stringing together a bunch of jobs just to make ends meet, or they're working in an area that's lower paying than what they would have expected to maintain or at least increase their lifestyle. But here's the kicker. Gen Z also has less trust, or at least those surveyed have less trust in our institutions like media, corporations, and government, specifically in their ability to help them lead the life that they want. And so this tells me that there's a growing mistrust by Gen Z in these larger institutions, and that should give us all pause for concern. Now, you may be asking, why should that give us pause for concern? And the reason why is because once people feel politically disconnected, they feel like the institutions aren't really backing them, they don't feel like they can get ahead, well, that can lead to a recipe of anxiety, stress, depression, the likes we haven't even seen yet. But here's the other really interesting piece to this research, and that for the first time ever, housing is the biggest predictor of fertility, of wanting to start a family, etc. This is more than any generation ever. Now, I can understand, being a millennial, I feel like we were one of the last generations, or if not the last generation in recent memory, that could eke ourselves into the housing market at an early age. But the housing market's become so unaffordable for just everyday Canadians. Forget youth or millennial or boomer. It's just very unaffordable. And on top of that, there's very strict lending rules by banks more than ever before. And so this creates a bit of havoc for those who are younger, with less assets, who are trying to jump into the housing market more than any time before. And if you think about it, if your rents are $2,500 plus, if your groceries are going up, if you're stringing together a few jobs just to make ends meet, if your, assets aren't growing, you're not really thinking about a family because you're literally only thinking about survival, and that's it. Now, I don't know if the mistrust in government, media, and corporations amongst Gen Z are any real different from millennials or Gen Xers or boomers at their age. I imagine perhaps there were levels of mistrust and distrust in these institutions with younger generations. And the reason there is because they are very vital to the economy. But because our politics and our governments are more catered to an older demographic, they probably don't even see themselves in modern day politics or in modern day decision making by government. And it may take them 10, 15 years for them to start seeing themselves in the decisions that are being made. So my other video talked about this fertility crisis that Canada has. It's not about that fertility rate as I look at it. It's not about a morality crisis as I look at it. It's not about forcing people to have kids. In many countries around the world, there are programs geared towards young people having kids. I don't think it's necessarily about that in particular. I think there's a broader issue here. The broader issue is that Gen Z just doesn't feel as connected to our society as a whole. And perhaps this is higher than other generations. And I think they're probably thinking about housing as the number one indicator. Because if you have housing early in your life, that's a really good indicator of your future financial success and your ability to not worry later in life, especially if you have health issues, etc. If you have assets that you can, borrow from, rent out, etc., that's such a leg up for your financial security well into your later years. And if that's out of reach at an early age for Gen Z, they're probably thinking by the time I'm able to get into housing and by the time I pay off that housing, I'll be well into my 70s or 80s if I'm lucky. And do people want to carry a mortgage into those twilight years of their lives? Probably not. That Gen Z feels disconnected from our society as a whole. So instead of government programs trying to get people to have kids, maybe, just maybe, there's a belonging crisis, a trust crisis, a sense of I'm actually contributing to a country that I see a future in, that I can be part of. But you remove that future vision, and suddenly you get people who are truly, truly disillusioned on the way forward. But I'd love to know what you think, and I'd love to know if you think that we're facing a fertility crisis or a trust crisis. Let me know what you think in the comments below. My name is Christopher. I'm here to talk about the things that our government and media are not. So like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.